Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the development sessions. We are so excited for everyone to be here today. We have an excellent program. I just wanted to give a couple housekeeping pieces of information. This is being recorded, so it will be available afterwards later this week on the Georgia Cities Foundation website at georgiacitiesfoundation.org. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to use our Q&A box or our chat box, and we will be monitoring that throughout the presentation. At this time, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Mayor Matt Seale from the City of Ocilla.
Hey, thanks, Stephanie. Welcome everybody to today's program. Like Stephanie said, we do have some great information to put out from some really great guest panelists. So I am just going to facilitate things and let them do the talk. And I do just want to say, just to reiterate what Stephanie said, at the end of the 3 different presentations, we will have an opportunity for a Q&A session. So we're not going to be taking questions at the end of each presentation, so they'll all be at the end. But as you know, questions you'd like to ask, go ahead and put those in the chat box or in the Q&A box. Some of the panelists may actually jump right in and answer them pretty quickly. If not, we'll get to those all at the end. And if you have a question that's to a specific presenter, please make sure to put that person's name, and I'll be glad to ask that person specifically and make sure it's as good and precise of information and answers as we can get you. So. Our first speaker is Larry Hanson. He's the Executive Director of the Georgia Municipal Association, and he is always a snazzy dresser, so I'm actually wearing a sweater today because I knew it couldn't match his sport coat talents. So Larry, go ahead and give us an update on rural broadband in Georgia cities.
Thank you, Mayor Seale, and certainly it's a pleasure to be here today and great to have so many officials joining us. And it's great to be with a distinguished group of panelists today. I'm looking forward myself to hearing from Deana Perry and Bill Price and Mayor Steve Ledbetter. As Mayor Seale said, we at GMA obviously have great interest in this, representing all 530 cities and 37 cities in Georgia, and recognizing that this is a need in much, if not most, of our state. Many of you know a little bit about my background. I was a city manager for 22 and a half years and in a rural area of the state. While Valdosta was metropolitan, most everything around us was rural. We also had a military base there, and that really piqued my interest in this some years ago, seeing the impact, the negative impact on military families, those that are serving our country and often deployed. And Moody had the highest deployability rate in the entire Air Force. And yet those families that are left, a spouse trying to submit a job application without having broadband, a child needing to do homework, or children wanting to have FaceTime or a Zoom call with their deployed parent and unable to do so without purchasing a hotspot. It often could be at the time $100 a month. So I saw the impact firsthand in an extraordinary way on military families, because bases are often not in the heart of a city, but they're on the outlying area. And it was in 4 counties and actually in a rural part of our region. And so obviously I also serve on the Georgia Department of Economic Development, and I represent a rural area of the state, that same Valdosta congressional area. And likewise, I saw the impact of so many smaller communities being unable to compete successfully, because in the world today, as you all know as well as I do, infrastructure is not just transportation, water and sewer and other utilities. Broadband is infrastructure, and it is just as essential, if not more today, than it ever has been. And without it, cities and counties and local communities can't compete successfully. You think about it today, and I had examples of this as we were recruiting industries, but even warehousing and distribution manages their product through high-speed broadband, high-speed internet. And when it's not available, that's something too that a rural community cannot even attract or maintain. So in every aspect of economic development today, even down to those type of industries, having high-speed broadband and having a strong internet capability is an absolute necessity. In fact, in my last couple of years in Valdosta, we lost 2 businesses to Thomasville, Georgia, because of their publicly owned RoseNet, who could provide a more robust service at a better rate to industries that left Valdosta to go to Thomasville. And so that really also brought it home to me as how important it is. And one of those was a drug distribution facility where all of their inventory, they were the largest company in the country that managed not main stores like CVS and Walgreens, but most of the others. And it was really all managed electronically with infrastructure, very few people, about 30 employees. And so when the private providers in our community could not provide what they needed, they up and left and went to Thomasville instead. So I saw firsthand the impact that this could have. 3 years ago, I was asked to serve on the FCC Broadband Deployment Advisory Commission. So I spent over 3 years now serving, representing Georgia and trying to help our state with the FCC. And I actually ended up being co-chair of a model code for municipalities working group, where the 30 of us spent about a year developing model codes that are now have been adopted by the FCC with the goal of helping to streamline processes, remove roadblocks, remove barriers so that broadband could be deployed better throughout the country, and even so in rural areas. And obviously that takes a lot of teamwork, and it took a lot of us giving some, whether that was government or industry or education, just the different fields working together to help create now what we have is some model policies and some model codes. And we encourage cities and counties and local governments, to consider using those. And so now here we are today. I want to give a shout out to the state of Georgia. That's why I'm so glad to be on this call with Deana and Bill and the work that they've done. With my work on the FCC established a new standard for mapping. And before it even became effective nationwide, Georgia was actually mapping the state of Georgia using that standard. And of course now has basically successfully completed an entire mapping project of the state. And about a year ago, I was able to arrange a meeting with Deana and Chairman Commissioner Nunn and myself to meet with Chairman Pye of the FCC to talk about getting Georgia moved up a little bit and getting investing, because our state really had now mapped the entire state, meeting the FCC's future mapping standards. So that really is a big deal. And then I think here we are today, we've seen the impact of a pandemic. And while the pandemic did not make these things happen, what it did is really accentuate the impact of broadband and internet on our lives. You look at what's happened now with our schools being remote, and the need for young people in all areas, in all regions, rural, urban, regardless, to have access to what they need in order just to perform the work that they need to do. We see the need in workforce development. We see the need not only from a pandemic aspect with COVID and so many doctors now even doing telemedicine and having their appointments online, but even now in Georgia and other states, as we're having rural hospitals and rural facilities closed, telemedicine has to fill a critical role till we can address that as a country and as a state to ensure that all Georgians have access to hospitals in our rural areas. But right now, telemedicine is a critical component to that, and we shouldn't run the risk of people dying in an ambulance because they can't connect, with a doctor even while they're trying to transport someone an extra 40 or 50 or 60 miles to help save that life. And what that is going to take is additional investment from the federal government and state government, and actually more partnerships, and that includes local governments as well as private providers. And I'm happy to see through our advisory committee in the state of Georgia now, we are breaking some of those barriers, trying to set aside our competitive differences and work for the good of the customer and the consumer in Georgia. And so we are seeing more collaboration now between local governments and private providers, and that's going to be a critical part of this. And I am pleased now that we're seeing federal funding through the USDA. We're also seeing it now in some of the stimulus bills that have been passed, and there's a substantial piece, hopefully, if the 1.9 trillion bill passes for broadband deployment. And also there's been talk now for years about a infrastructure bill, and we have to think and hope that there will be one. And certainly we're already working through the National League of Cities and with GMA and our lobbying team to ensure that any future bill on infrastructure clearly makes broadband, fiber, all of that eligible and recognize it in the same sense as it would roads and water and sewer and bridges and other infrastructure, because that is exactly what it is today. So I would encourage all of our city officials to try and build those partnerships, reach out to your private sector companies, take advantage of the programs DCA is standing up, like the Broadband Ready Community designation. Prepare yourself to apply where you can compete successfully for some of the grant programs that are coming down the line. Continue to work with your legislative leaders. Georgia's made some changes in recent years, including opening up so co-ops and electric cities and MEAG cities can also have provide these services, and all of that together. And it's going to take all of us working together to meet these needs, because we do have to recognize that in some cases it's purely a business decision. And until such time as that it lines up where companies can make a profit, there are going to be places where we have to have investment from federal, state government, and even local government in order that we can fill that gap to get that last mile, to get this broadband service directly into homes and directly into businesses. And we all share a vested interest in this if we want to see our state prosper and our cities and our counties and our local communities prosper. So with that said, Mayor Seale, I want to pitch it back to you so that we can get into hearing from Deana and Bill, because they are really where the rubber meet the road, and their agencies, the Georgia Technology Authority and the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, are doing some really good work.
Larry, thanks for that. And yeah, we'll just move right along to talk about the things that have happened from the state level since 2018 with the passage of Senate Bill 402 and the Georgia Broadband Deployment Initiative. So we're going to hear now, and I think there's a presentation to go along with this from Deana Perry from the Department of Community Affairs and Bill Price from the Georgia Technology Authority. So Deana and Bill, you'll take it away.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Larry. It's a pleasure to be here and be part of this panel today. It's an honor to serve with you all, and I really appreciate the work that GMA does across the state, and we appreciate your service on the advisory committee, Larry. You have been an invaluable resource to that advisory committee.
Deana, your screen is shared now.
Okay, thank you, Larry.
Deana, your audio is muted somehow now. We can see you, but we can't hear you.
It doesn't look like you've hit the mute button, but we're not getting any audio from you. We can still see the presentation though.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're good now.
Okay, great. I'm not sure what happened. Thank you. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to talk about the Georgia Broadband Deployment Initiative. I appreciate the time that I've had in the past. Since 2018, I have been in the role as Executive Director of Broadband for the Department of Community Affairs. This position was created out of Senate Bill 402 that was passed in 2018, went into effect in July of 2018. The mission is to bring services to the unserved areas across Georgia. Part of what was in legislation, it was prescribed in legislation that we do a statewide map to identify where those unserved areas are. By comparison of what was the standard of the national map of the FCC. Larry talked a little bit about it and our different approach from the FCC map that was current, which was if one location is served, then all locations are served. In addition to the mandate for a statewide map, there was also a mandate for a statewide framework for grants. So we also worked really hard for the last couple of years to develop the rules and regs. Those were approved and put into place also in 2019. So those were a couple of things that was prescribed in legislation, as well as a Broadband Ready designated community program, which we also have put in place. I will share with you the progress and where we're at with those in a few minutes. But one of the things that, okay, now, there we go. So one of the things that was in legislation was creating this project team. And it's really important that we gathered all the resources available to the state and bring that together so that we could move forward statewide, leveraging all the resources that would be made available to us. So the initial project team is DCA, Georgia Technology Authority, Georgia Department of Transportation, States Property and Commission, and the Department of Economic Development, as well as the Carl Vinson Institute of the University of Georgia. We have an advisory committee that is represented by ACCG, AT&T, Comcast, the Georgia EMCs. Larry serves on behalf of GMA, the Georgia Cable Association, the Development Authorities, Windstream, and the Georgia Telecom Association. As Larry indicated, it is so critical to bring all these partners together to find solutions. We do believe that one of the key strategies is these public-private partnerships between communities and some of the private partners. The core team that has been working on developing all the tools that we have made available, from the mapping to the grant rules to cost modeling, all of these is made up of me representing the Department of Community Affairs, Bill Price with Georgia Technology Authority, and Eric McRae and his GIS team at CBIRG. Doing the statewide map was a 2-year process. It was a heavy lift on behalf of the state, but everybody came together and we were able to bring together the statewide map that you can find on the broadband.georgia.gov website at DCA. Eric and his team has been critical in bringing his GIS team and resources, as well as the leadership of Bill Price. But it wouldn't go without saying that map would not have been possible without the participation of all of the retail providers throughout the state. They helped us willingly without any incentives or at their own cost. So we really have to give a lot of credit to them for their participation, for without them and all the work with the number of agencies, that would not have been possible. So part of the things that we have been looking at across is developing the mapping tool, identifying partners, understanding all the technology options that's available, whether it be a wired solution, a wireless, fixed wireless. We hear a lot of talk about satellite solutions. Being able to understand what those technologies are and what would be available, and how you might partner with someone, what would be the right technology solution for that. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Also understanding the investment, understanding funding sources, and then of course applying for the Broadband Ready designation. So as we've developed these tools, we want to be a resource to communities so that you can understand how to utilize the mapping tool. You can go to our website and you can look to see what the number of unserved, the locations, but there's some additional information that if you would like, utilizing our resources, the GIS team at CBIOG, the understanding of technologies with Bill Price and Georgia Technology Authority, you can reach out to us. Also, we developed a statewide cost model to understand what cost is associated at a census block level, meaning what does it cost, what's the average cost per location that would be required, what would be the investment required to build out to those unserved. Also identifying funding sources. As some of you have probably heard, the governor has did make recommendations for funding the state broadband grant program. The budget has not been adopted. We are anticipating any day now that could happen. And once that adoption is done, we are set up, ready to roll out a program and begin to share with you what the next steps are. We are anticipating a workshop for technical assistance in March. We will post a grant program fact sheet on our website. The rules and regs to the grant program will also be posted on our website. We will also be publishing a NOFA and let you know the application window, a grant workshop for those resources and to understand you need as an applicant will also be made available after the NOFA is published. We will be sitting and ready to implement all of these things once we know funding, the budget has been adopted and we can move forward. We will continue to work with GMA so that they can make available to you any information regarding any of the workshops, any of the deadlines, or any of the publications of anything regarding state funding. We also are tracking any federal funding so that we can make communities aware of what funding opportunities they are and that a community can apply for. We'll be tracking those as well as helping to assist identifying those and what resources you might need to support that application. We work with providers across the state in applying for the USDA Reconnect, as well as the partnerships that was involved in making those applications successful. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Bill Price with Georgia Technology Authority. He has brought 25 years of expertise and then some to this, so we do rely heavily on the resources at GTA for technical expertise.
Thanks, Deana. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
I'm going to go back. Oh, okay, sure. I guess the first thing that I would say for the audience is we've been on a 2-year journey, and Deana and DCA has done a great job of assembling a great deal of resources to go climb Mount Everest, basically, to do the map, to get the grant program ready, to do some deep dive studies, to support DOE and how do they connect students in this COVID environment, working with DOT, economic development. And so we've assembled a pretty significant amount of information and technical expertise and business expertise to be available to local government as assistance to help you do the thinking you need to do and planning and making good decisions based on good, accurate data. So we've arrived. We're at the summit, basically, and with the funding in the grant program, we're going to hopefully put it all to good use. And since local government plays a key role in the grant program, it's important to us that we do a great job assisting you guys and looking at all the information you need to have to make good decisions. So people like myself, you know, I'm assigned to this over the last 2 years full time. Deana is contracted with other areas of expertise like wireless. We've done deep dive studies and thorough analysis to try and inform you what are the best options in your geography, given, you know, the uniqueness of each and every one of them. There's a study that is available. I think Deana can make it available to GMA for distribution, you know, if Larry, if you want to make that happen. But so, yeah, I mean, we've been working feverishly and still are in preparing for the release of the funding announcement that's we anticipate will happen. And we have a great deal of knowledge and expertise across many organizations, both under contract and other government entities that are involved. So that's the key. I think that's the key message for me, Deana. Is there something I left out?
I don't think so, Bill. And on the technology piece, we recognize it can kind of get confusing when you hear about the various technologies that are available. You know, fiber to the home, fixed wireless, any type of wireless solution or satellite. What is the best solution for your geographic area? And so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to be a resource to you as far as understanding what those technology solutions might be, because we do think that not all solutions fit every geographic area. So it is really important to know what solution works for your area. So we want to be available to you as a resource in understanding that. One of the things that I wanted to touch on that I kind of brushed past was the Broadband Ready designation. The Broadband Ready designation put in place the first year, really, 2018, and so we've had several communities. We've got a total of 10 communities right now that have received the Broadband Ready designation. And the two components that's most important if you're interested in applying would be having a comprehensive plan that has a broadband element that's updated, and then also passing a model ordinance. Those things can be found on our website. As far as becoming a community, one of the importance of that is it does lend priority consideration in a statewide grant program. So I did want to mention that. If you have any questions or follow up on that, again, you can reach out to the DCA broadband team. I'll put up some contact for you as well. So if you are looking for any kind of guidance in overall, whether it's understanding our mapping tool, cost modeling, who a potential provider is, because we have worked with retail providers across the state, we have identified the retail providers, even what county and areas, so we can make that available to you. Also, as I mentioned, the technology support and solutions, you can reach out to us through the local government website that you see, email that you see on the screen right now. For the broadband ready designation, you can reach out to Brittany Hickam at DCA. She is the one that works with applicants for those broadband ready designations. For your basic mapping inquiries, Jason Seale at our office can assist you, and then as needed, we'll bring in other resources such as GTA or CVIOG. For an understanding about the comprehensive plan, reach out to our local and regional planning department, and they can assist you if you have questions about the update and the amendment needed for the comprehensive plan. So at this time, we would be glad to take any questions that you may have.
We'll actually go ahead and hold the questions to the end. We're going to get one more presentation, and then anybody that does have any questions for Deana, for Bill, or for Larry, I should have said this after we switched from Larry. Any questions about anything that you've seen in the reports, go ahead and type those in the chat box, put them in the Q&A section, and we'll make sure to get to all those at the end. Our next presenter, it's nice when we know how bad the problems are and get a good look at what we're trying to accomplish, to have a good success story. And so I think that's what our next speaker represents, is a small town success story, my favorite kind. So Mayor Steve Ledbetter of the great small town of Woodbury, Georgia, over in Meriwether County, is going to talk about what his community did to help with the rural broadband issue and how to overcome it. And just in case Steve Ledbetter was going to be humble about it, Steve, go ahead and hold up that trophy you just pulled out of the mail, I think just today. Steve and the city of Woodbury recently received a Visionary Award from Georgia Trend magazine for what he's about to talk about today. So Steve, I just wanted to publicly say congratulations for that. I know you're going to be humble, and as you should be, and say it was a team effort, but good leadership is a requirement of that, and that's what you provided. So go ahead and Steve, and tell us the success story of your small town.
Yeah, thank you very much for all of that. And you're absolutely right. I am going to be humble about it, because we take pride in the great staff that we have working in the city of Woodbury, but it's also more than just the staff that works here in our city hall. We have about 30 very engaged, very active members of our community who work diligently for all of the community to bring this type of technology and benefit to our citizens. And I do want to be humble, and I want to share with you that I'm extraordinarily honored to be a part of this panel, and publicly say thank you, Larry, for the Visionary Award this year, for the recognition that you gave us during the Cities United session just a few weeks ago. One of the things that I've heard during this conversation, both from Larry and from Deana, and from Bill as well, is the importance of how broadband impacts our rural communities here in Georgia, and how it drives the economic development. And Larry, I agree with you wholeheartedly. One of the things that I heard you say was that you have to provide a quality of service at a cost effective for your community, so that we can engage all sectors of our community for the telemedicine, the education, the work from home now in the midst of this pandemic that we have going around. There's opportunity that just abounds over the last year, and Woodbury really wanted to take advantage of that. We looked at all of the options with the great help of Deana Perry and her whole team. We could not be in the position that we're in without the support of our state representatives in those positions like Deana Fields, and I'm just very thrilled that she supported us. Woodbury was the first city to be recognized as the broadband ready city, and we wanted to really go after that designation because we wanted to invite as many of the big name companies as we could, and even some of the little name companies, if they would come see us, into our community to provide high-speed internet. But one of the things that we experienced early on was the challenge that Larry indicated, which is the return on investment from these companies. They did not see a return on investment to come into a community with only 1,203 residents in town. And it really created some challenges for us. We did not have a doctor in town because we didn't have the ability to handle the telemedicine. Our only provider in town was offering at best speeds of sub 12 megabits per second with download speeds and an upload speed of less than 1 meg upload. So it precluded not only the telemedicine, but it precluded all of our students from being able to homeschool during the midst of the pandemic. So we looked at opportunities, and Bill's right. You've got to make sure that the offering that you provide is capable of working inside of your community. So working with our state guys, we actually went out and looked at everything we could from a city's perspective because we needed to offer the solution from a utility from City Hall. So we partnered. We did exactly what Deana described earlier. We partnered with Spectrum Enterprises, and they pulled a fiber line into City Hall. And from City Hall, here we'll do a little show and tell. This device here is the antenna that feeds from City Hall to our local businesses and homes to provide high-speed internet to our community. We are sharing 1 gig of speed for our community, and on average, we're running right at 100 megabits per second for the customers that we have online with us. We have approximately 50 customers online, and the reason that we only have 50 so far is because the pandemic struck our installation team and took them out of business for about a month and a half. So we've slowed our installation down because those guys had to be quarantined and they couldn't do the installation. So we've slowed down just a little bit. But of all of our customers that we have online, they are all happy. And you know how fate is. You typically get emails from people who are experiencing issues in the middle of events like we have right now. Well, unfortunately for me, I got one of those, but it wasn't one of those bad emails. I literally just received an email that said, "Thank you for the high-speed internet. Here's my speed," and it was a kudo to the city. So it was great to get during the middle of this presentation. But we're not the only ones that have done this. We have shared our experiences, our tips and traps, if you will, with some of our sister cities over in Pike County. The city of Concord is currently working to bring their system online because their geography is similar to what we have here in Woodbury, and the system works very well here, and they are deploying it in their city as well so that they can provide high-speed internet to their residents. The system works. Not every setup will work in every community, but we have a very successful system up and running, and we will be more than happy to share what we've done here in Woodbury with you, or you can come by and just take a look at what we've done and see it firsthand. With that, Matt, I'll turn it back over to you, and appreciate the opportunity to share the good news story from Woodbury.
Thanks, Steve. So we'll go into the Q&A part of the presentations at this time. So I don't see any questions either in the chat or in the Q&A, but you guys go ahead and type those in because, as always, which I think is why Stephanie asked me to do this, I'm an inquisitive type, so I've got a few questions. I actually want to ask Deana first. You mentioned there's 10 communities that have the Broadband Ready certification. I remember Oglethorpe County was the first one to get it. As Steve just mentioned, Woodbury was the first city to get it, but to be, I think it was July of 19 when Oglethorpe County, if I remember, and I'm just going from memory. So in over a year and a half, 10 communities. Is there an impediment? I'm sure part of it is until there was a financial incentive to have the certification. I'm sure that'll prompt some other communities to get on board. But is there some kind of impediment that people run into? Because I'm looking at doing it for Ocilla, and I actually see in the attendees list my good friend Chris Falk, who's an Irwin County commissioner, is looking to take it before the Irwin County Commission. It's the application. It's to make sure that this is a component of your comprehensive plan. And then it's the ordinance, and that seems to be pretty straightforward. I've already looked at the template, and obviously there's a few things you got to change and have a point of contact. But what is it that you think is keeping communities from not having already done this in the year and a half? And just any advice or encouragement you want to give to the listeners, because I feel like it's a pretty straightforward thing from what I've seen.
It is fairly straightforward, but if you haven't, if your comprehensive plan hasn't been updated, you need the amendment, then you do have to go through that process. And sometimes that process in itself is just a little bit timely. You know, it takes a little bit to understand it now. In some cases, you may be, a lot of people are in compliance with your comprehensive plan, and it's not ready for an update, so you just do an amendment to get that part of your comprehensive plan. But it may be that you're on track, that now is the time that you're scheduled to update your overall comprehensive plan to begin with. And then also adopting the model ordinance and then the application process. So you know, so a lot of the time, and as far as receiving the applications, reviewing the applications, that's not too timely. I would say a couple of months. But the process of if you have to adopt a piece in your comprehensive plan, or if you have to adopt a model ordinance, which every community is going to have to adopt the model ordinance. But we have found that some comprehensive plans do have the language and have already given consideration to its broadband, so it meets that broadband element component. So overall, I think we've really had our program in place about a year, maybe a year and a half. So we just redesignated some of the communities. So I do think it has kind of come in waves.
I imagine, like you said, that comprehensive plan renewal, instead of doing an amendment when you know you have to do it every 5 years anyway, I imagine there'll be some communities, so you'll probably just get more people doing it, as that requirement naturally takes care of itself anyway.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Matt, you and I had a conversation on a small town podcast some months ago about this being an economic development opportunity for smaller communities and rural communities. You know, when you think about what's happened because of the pandemic and remote work that really was forced upon many, that is now going to change forever. And you've got companies as large as State Farm and Coca-Cola saying a certain portion of their workers will never come back to an office building. And even we in government, that had always been sort of very traditional in that sense, have realized many jobs can be performed from home. So as you think about that, workers will be able to live anywhere in this state and have the quality of life they want, the community they want, to raise their children and their families if they have decent broadband and, you know, high-speed internet access. And so it is an incredible opportunity, because there are going to be many, many jobs and more employers having people around the state rather than concentrated in high-rise office buildings to serve their customers on the ground much better. So I do think that's something that we should seize upon as an opportunity.
Steve, go ahead. You got something there?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate the fact that even though you have high-speed internet in your community, don't think that that's the end game. The opportunity that Deana Perry and her group have afforded us to go after this broadband ready community designation affords you two things. One, it affords other companies, other high-speed internet companies to come take a look at you. And we are seeing that here in Woodbury. We have had a number of companies, after we deployed our wireless network, we've had a number of companies come in and actually have conversation with us because we are a broadband ready community. But something that Deana shared with us earlier, those communities who are broadband ready communities and have received that designation receive a little bit higher on the totem pole opportunities for the grants that are coming through. And that's what I heard Deana say earlier. So I want to make sure that we highlight that point.
You know,
Steve,
and it does give you priority points in a state grant program. And it also, before we had a state grant program, it also gave you a platform, because we do publish it and we do share that information. And so we do try to connect those partners and to make it known that you are a community who has a champion like Mayor Ledbetter, because that champion is really critical. Because I will say the one common thread of those that we have seen move the needle and sometimes it's more than move mountains to get connected to their communities, that have a champion. The city of Woodbury is a prime example of that, of having that champion, having that leadership, bringing together the stakeholders, then identifying what is needed and helping and finding the assistance to identify who those partners are.
And Matt, another point, I think we have to change the way we're thinking again and seize this opportunity. So in other words, anytime we have internal or external projects in our cities, we should look at anytime there's a road project or a drainage project or a water and sewer project, anytime we're digging a trench in the ground, we need to consider whether we need to put a piece of fiber in there or at a minimum put conduit in there so that fiber can be run later. You know, it reminds me of back in the day and becoming a city manager in '95, our city had sort of built out naturally and we had new development standards. And one of the things we imposed was a requirement that subdivisions and new homes have a sidewalk. And so it sort of looked funny for a long time because there had not been a requirement before that you were putting a sidewalk and it seemed like it'd be a sidewalk to nowhere. But over time, those things become connected. And also it minimizes the gaps that you have to fill later when you decide that it's cost effective to do it. So I would encourage every city to look at their own standards for themselves and their own infrastructure projects, as well as those that they have other submit plans for, and consider requirement or at least a look-see and communicating with the industry if there's a viable need or reason to put fiber or conduit to prepare for the future.
Steve, just real quick, and Deana mentioned some of the things I know you benefited from and going through the process, but as a community that actually got the broadband ready certification, you know, obviously you want to encourage some investment to come in. We talked about that and how having that certification does that. Now we've talked about the you know, the possible financial benefits coming from the state now that there's at least a proposal on the table from the governor to do so. But in going through the process of just pulling those stakeholders together, was there something that you really gained from it, even other than those more tangible things that you would want to make sure people knew about, just to say, hey, look, even without the money, there's this benefit to it?
Oh, absolutely. Engaging the hearts and minds of your citizens is absolutely essential. And that's exactly what occurred here in our community. When we found that common thread of what I call the burning platform, and we all collectively walked to put out the fire at the burning platform, which was high-speed internet for us, it made such a tremendous difference. The community just bonded together, and it leaked over into everything else that we were doing.
We've got some questions coming in from our attendees now, and my good friend Chris Palco I referenced earlier actually just said, now as a city and county adopts the ordinance, how might we incentivize the providers to truly serve the underserved areas? Then he points out that it may be you can come in and take a place that's already got slow internet and just make it a little faster while leaving someone that has virtually nothing exactly where they are. So where is that? Larry, you and I have talked about some of those kind of incentive things on legislative issues in the past.
Well, rarely do you see companies want to compete with other companies. While a company might enhance its service, but it's more rare unless you have great population density for someone to try and overbuild another provider. But what we can do is look at, are there reasons why, are we the opposite of broadband friendly? Are we unfriendly? Do we have a history of taking a long time to review plans? Are our fees excessive? How are we viewed? Are we viewed as business friendly? And I also think that the answer to this really has to be a piece of grant funding from the federal government, state government. And Deana, I'm not sure you mentioned it. I know the budget's not final yet, but I think there's 20 million right now in the current state budget under consideration for broadband, for rural broadband deployment, and a commitment to have at least 10 million in the budget every year going forward. But what it's going to take is someone to fill that missing piece. So if a community can get a plan, work with a provider, determine what the gap is, and that gap may be $2 million that is the difference between a company saying that we can make that business model work, and that's normally what it is. So that's the purpose of having grant programs, whether it's federal, state, or other, to bridge that gap, to make it a viable business proposal. And then once they get the infrastructure built, of course, the customers will then connect over time as a community grows. But I really do think, while it is an absolute valid point that's been made there by Chris, that there's going to have to be a gap filler to make the initial investment economically viable in very rural areas.
So is there, just to kind of follow up on that, because we've actually got in our county where there's somebody that's actually coming in on one side of the county, but the other side, it's just not as economically viable. Are the things we can do, or is that where we have to be like Steve Ledbetter and actually stand in the gap as the local government?
Well, but if we look back at history, the power grid in this country was not built in the whole country or even in Georgia overnight. You start with centers of population. Even the electric grid, Georgia Power started with concentrations of people, and then as they generate income and make profits, they expand the system into less dense population areas. So, it's not a realistic expectation, unfortunately, that every area is going to be served immediately, and certainly it has been. But getting that investment in one part of your community makes the next investment significantly more economical.
We got a couple other questions coming in, and we read those off from the Q&A session there. Tim saying, his city of Sky Valley, we have broadband, but just barely. How can we get more out of Windstream? I think the answer is going to be do some things to invite competition, or maybe partners with someone like Woodbury did. But anybody got any other more specific advice than that?
Well, in many cases, we're talking about underserved, and that really is the state standard, and the state definition is 25/3 down and 3 up is the standard, and so the state considers anything under that as being unserved, because we know in today's time that most applications require those kind of speeds to support those applications, and no more time is like now after we have seen all the things that we were trying to do at home due to COVID. At any given time, I have a son who is home. He could be, trying to do remote learning. I could be on a Zoom meeting. We could have various things, and it putting a drain on the capacity. So getting to the answer of your question is just understanding who the potential partners are. Larry made a good point in that part of a city or county, you may be seeing build out, but on the other side, maybe not necessarily. But as you edge out those networks, you do drive down those costs. But maybe there's some gap funding, and that's where the state might, or whatever you can do, or maybe there's some assets that's not a monetary asset that your community can bring to the table that would reduce the cost, and that you could leverage to bring solutions that might drive down that cost and make more of a business case for you to do that build out. And some of the things that Larry mentioned around, if you are doing infrastructure type projects, maybe that is the time to maybe do some cost sharing, where you've got, the ground open up. So now that you can do those buried solutions, buried fiber, and driving down the cost. So you just got to think about who your partners are, what the needs are, and identifying what assets you have to leverage to help drive down those costs, inch out those networks, edge out those networks to reach those areas that are unserved.
Tim also asked where we can find the model ordinance, and I'm going to ask Chris Higdon if you can go get to the Department of Community Affairs, get the actual link, because I know both the model ordinance and the application and the some other references there on the Department of Community Affairs if you just search rural broadband, but Chris Higdon, if you could put that in the chat for everyone, just to have that link. And also just want to point out that Bill Price put a good response to Chris Falk's question about broadband availability. I just pointed out for everybody to look in the chat. Everyone should have access to that. The next questions are from Randall, asking if you can speak about the DCA grant application through One Georgia that will be coming out soon, and how communities can prepare on how to write those grant applications. Deana, we'll guess that one's more for you.
Okay, so the funding that's been proposed in the amended budget that Larry was referencing, the 20 million that the governor's talking about, that will go through the One Georgia Authority program, and that is the rules and the regs that we have developed to support should a program be funded like the opportunity would be now. And so you can find the rules and regs on our website. That's broadband.georgia.gov. So you can find those on our website listed under resources. And as we move forward, I had mentioned in March, we are looking to hold a workshop that would provide technical assistance so that would aid communities in utilizing the tools like the mapping tool, like the cost model, identifying partners, all of those things that would help you develop an application for those funds. And then once the budget has been adopted, then we will begin to release a NOFA. We'll do a workshop on the grant program itself. We expect to see these things happen. We'll know for sure between now and the end of the month, any day now, actually, and we'll begin to roll things out beginning in March. And we will definitely use the resources at GMA. Larry's has been more than open to sharing whatever information that we can through the GMA to push out that information to communities. Bill, you want to talk about the summit that GTA is hosting in May?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you're good, Bill. Go ahead.
Yeah, so GTA has graciously, they hold an annual summit, and normally we just invite state employees, but this year is going to be different since it's virtual. We're going to do a 2-day summit, and the second day is going to be all about broadband. Now, the second day is scheduled to be May 5th, and we plan to work with GMA and ACCG and invite all local government to attend, and we're assembling a team to go deep into 3 things: what we've been doing with the Department of Education to help them figure out the best ways to connect as many students as possible. We're going to talk about the broadband map project and the tool and the results and how that's going to play into the grant program and what the grant applicants will need to know about that and how it's going to be used. And then the third part, which would be most interesting to local government, is going to be about the grant program and specifics. So that's every opportunity, we can to get in front of providers and grant applicants to inform them so that everybody clearly understands how this is going to work and what's the best way to go. We're going to use that. And so on May 5th, we're going to focus on that. That's what you wanted, right now.
And Matt, there's one other question that I see in the Q&A about an article in today's AJC about the Central Georgia EMC and Southern Rivers Energy and others rolling out broadband. And I want to mention, many are aware that the Georgia House had a study committee that worked for several years on issues affecting a multitude of issues affecting rural Georgia. And out of that actually came a bill that passed, I believe, 2 sessions ago, to clarify. There was a question about whether EMCs and others could actually provide this service, and now it's clear and legal that they can. So obviously it takes some time to plan that. Electrical providers, it was something new for them, and some were somewhat reluctant, so they had to get comfortable with it. But clearly they have a huge head start in that they have employees, they have trucks, they have equipment, they have so much of the human infrastructure needed to begin this. And so I'm encouraged to see that is now beginning to happen throughout the state. That's an example where the Central Georgia EMC is preparing to get in that business, and that will not only fill gaps, it could also, it certainly will fill gaps in areas where there is no service, but it might even create some competition.
That was the next question I was going to get to, so thanks for speaking to that. I guess the most important thing, and we heard that with Mayor Ledbetter talking about the partnerships he was able to put together in Woodbury. This is not something that anybody is going to really do well all by themselves. And obviously, even if they could, partnerships work so much better than just going alone. So even if we're in places where those things haven't been announced in the big paper yet, it's important to have those conversations, be willing to step out and work with each other and see what we can work out on a small scale in small towns like Woodbury, and then across entire regions like what's being announced in Middle Georgia. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, we've kind of reached the end of our hour. So I just want to thank everybody for attending. I will point out Chris Higdon did put in the link to where you can find the model ordinance. It's in both a PDF and a Word document, so you can pull it down and type in the name of your community, make it real easy for you to plug what you need into that and have that passed in your either county commission or city council to go ahead and become broadband ready, get certified, and start inviting in some investment, and possibly, based on the budget outcome in the state, be eligible for some funding. So I want to thank all of our panelists. Stephanie, do you want to take it back, or let me just tell them that this is going to be available on the Georgia Cities Foundation website, and we hope that you'll join us for future webinars, and hope the information was of great value to you.
Thank you, Mayor Matt. We always appreciate you being our facilitator, and thank you, panelists. What a great presentation. And Mayor Matt did mention this will be on georgiacitiesfoundation.org website. And please join us again next month for our next development sessions. We have a special treat talking about trails and tourism. So once again, thank you very much, and everyone enjoy their afternoon.